Donald Trump is formally appointed as the Republican nominee for the US election and appoints a millennial as a running mate. Rio Tinto gets the go-ahead for a multi-billion iron ore mine in Guinea, and the price of cotton tumbles, hitting Australian exporters as people turn to polyester. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It's Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2024. I'm Julian King, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Julian.
Sean, the main story this morning, Donald Trump has been formally anointed as the Republican candidate for the US election in November. And he's picked an author, lawyer, former tech venture capitalist, and one-time anti-Trumpian to be his running mate.
Yeah, sure did. Mr. Trump's first public appearance since his shooting on the weekend was to a rapturous applause at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. A bandage covered his right ear, which had been shot during the assassination attempt. He was formally nominated as the Republican candidate, and it will be Mr. Trump's third successive presidential campaign. The former president has picked 39-year-old JD Vance as his running mate. Mr. Vance is a first-term senator from Ohio, the first millennial to run for such high public office, and something of a clone of Mr. Trump, agreeing pretty much with everything the former president proposes. He was also the person who, after the weekend's attempted assassination, immediately blamed the Democrats' rhetoric for the shooting. It wasn't always the case. Prior to 2016, he was very anti-Trump, calling him cultural heroin and reportedly comparing him to Hitler. His book, Hillbilly Elegy, explained why working-class white voters picked Mr. Trump in 2016. Basically, it recounted his own childhood in poor parts of Ohio and Kentucky and demonstrated just why so many people were disenchanted with what was going on in America. Now, Mr. Trump can't run again in 2028 because the US Constitution only allows for 2 terms. So Mr. Vance's nomination is very significant. If Mr. Trump wins this time around, it's more than likely that Mr. Vance then becomes the Republican nominee for president in 2028.
That's quite the turnaround. And Mr. Vance seems to be a popular pick among the tech sector, with Elon Musk committing $45 million a month to the Trump-Vance campaign.
It is a ridiculously large amount of money, far more than anyone else has ever given. The money will go to a new super political action committee that backs Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance. The group's called America PAC. Some of the other backers are interesting as well. So Planted Technologies co-founder Joe Lonsdale, a billionaire, he's in there. The Winklevoss twins. Julian, I'm sure you would know them, but listeners might remember them. Famous, basically they were rowers. They rowed together in the Olympics in 2008, and then they sued Mark Zuckerberg, claiming that he stole their idea to create Facebook. That's probably why they're most famous. They've gone on to become business people, entrepreneurs. Anyway, they're donating to this cause as well. Also, former US Ambassador to Canada, Kelly Craft, and her husband, Joe Craft. He's the chief executive of coal producer Alliance Resource Partners. Of course, Donald Trump has promised to lower the corporate tax rate, so it's not surprising that business leaders are on his side. Anyway, Elon Musk is leading the way there, $45 million a month to the Trump-Vance campaign.
Sean, how did the local markets perform yesterday?
Well, the S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.2%, finishing at 7,999 points. That's after Monday's record-setting session. There were decent falls among the materials, utilities, tech and consumer discretionary stocks, while the property sector outperformed. Aristocrat Leisure was the biggest laggard of the large caps, down nearly 3%, while BHP was off 1.5%. That meant Commonwealth Bank once again took the title as the largest stock on the ASX, notwithstanding it fell almost 0.5% as well. Best of the large caps yesterday was Goodman Group. It jumped nearly 2%. It was a wild day for Drone Shield. Now, this is the group that provides counter-drone defence solutions. We've had the CEO on the show before. Its share price hit a record high on opening, then fell 30%, recouped some of the losses, ended off about 24%. Now, there was no new news about the company, although some investment analysts came out and doubted its valuation. Drone Shield's share price went from 38 cents at the beginning of the year to $2.71 yesterday morning, and then it tumbled to close at $1.98. That's a pretty wild ride. Also yesterday, wealth management platform Hub24's share price closed flat after announcing stronger than expected inflows. Its share price isn't far off double what it was last July. And critical minerals producer IGO will write down the value of its exploration portfolio by up to $275 million. That's in relation to its nickel assets. Yet another nickel miner struggling. That sent IGO share price down 1%.
And Sean, off the back of the local market record highs immediately after this show, stay listening for your chat with Matthew Kidman, who's a regular on the Fear and Greed podcast platform from Centennial Asset Management.
Yeah, all about why the market hit a record on Monday, what stocks did well. So we talk about small caps versus large caps, and very importantly, what's going to happen in the future. It's a great chat with Matthew. He's always interesting, very knowledgeable about the market, so well worth a listen.
Okay, from local markets to international markets now, what's happening there?
Well, the US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell yesterday morning said that second quarter data bolstered confidence that inflation is cooling. That helped equity markets. Apple continues its incredible run. It's now worth $3.59 trillion US dollars. Oil's relatively flat. Gold's creeping higher, fetching nearly $2,430 US dollars an ounce. Bitcoin is worth more than $64,000 US dollars a unit. Seems to be heading higher on that famous Trump trade. Cryptos do well when people think Donald Trump is going to win the White House. The Aussie dollar's come back a bit. It's buying 67.3 US cents. And to end off this segment of the show, I thought I'd tell you about BlackRock. In the last quarter, Julian, the US-based wealth manager attracted $51 billion, that's US $billion, to its long-term investment funds. It now manages $10.6 trillion US dollars of assets. That's what's that? 15 trillion.
Goodness me.
Aussie. That's like managing the whole of the Australian residential property sector plus the superannuation sector. That's about the same value as what it manages. Incredible.
It is incredible. And you talked about there Bitcoin, plenty of enthusiasm, hasn't there been, Sean, for cryptocurrency after Mr. Trump was announced as the headline speaker for the Bitcoin 2024 conference later this month?
Yeah. It's an unusual spot for him to turn up, you would have thought, during a campaign. But obviously he feels he has, fans among that crowd, I suppose.
I'm sure he does. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Rio Tinto has won final Guinean and Chinese government approval for a mega African iron ore project, and first production is slated to begin within 18 months.
This is a big deal. Simandou is a massive reserve with an estimated 2 billion tonnes of high-grade iron ore. It lies in the southeast of the Republic of Guinea, over a 100-kilometre surface area. Rio's concession is a joint venture between it, Chinese state-owned companies, and the government of Guinea. Rio will spend 11.6 billion US dollars, that's about 18 billion Aussie dollars, on the development of the deposit and associated infrastructure. We're not just talking getting the ore out of the mine. We're also talking about developing 600 kilometres of rail infrastructure spanning the length of the country, as well as port infrastructure. The deposit will broaden Rio's iron ore portfolio beyond Australia and Canada. It will also open a whole new area of iron ore development. At the moment, Australia and Brazil are the main leaders. The size of this in Guinea suggests that that country could well become a major iron ore exporter. The announcement came as Rio confirmed that a train derailment had hampered exports last quarter. That news sent Rio's share price down more than 2%.
The national head of the CFMEU has described former Victoria branch boss John Setka as a man with integrity and credibility, and says there's no need for an independent inquiry into evidence of criminal links in the construction industry.
Zach Smith said the inquiry wasn't necessary because the union can take care of itself. He said he doesn't believe any construction deal with the government had been achieved through corruption. He told ABC Radio, and I quote, "The union movement is more than capable of dealing with allegations in their own ranks and responding appropriately. External administration and further intervention from government isn't necessary." Talk about a tin ear. Of course, Nine Media over the weekend reported that bikie gangs had infiltrated the CFMEU. Mr. Setka quit last Friday. Now, last night, the Sydney Morning Herald was reporting that the federal government is preparing to appoint an independent administrator to overhaul the CFMEU and clamp down on criminal elements within its ranks, amid growing concerns about the damage from the unlawful conduct of massive building projects in recent months.
Yeah, it's an issue that's not going away. Now, the boss of the Australian energy market operator, Daniel Westerman, says the opposition's plan to build 7 nuclear reactors would take too long to replace ageing coal generators.
Mr. Westerman, speaking at a clean energy summit, also said gas is the ultimate backstop during the transition to renewables. He said it's imperative to replace the retiring coal stations. That's upon us now. And even on the most optimistic outlook, nuclear power won't be ready in time. Under opposition leader Peter Dutton's plans, if he wins the next election, he'll build 5 large-scale nuclear plants, 2 smaller ones, with the first to come online about 2035. They'd be built on the sites of current coal-fired power stations. Now, at the moment, coal-fired power accounts for more than 50% of power generation in the national electricity market. You are not going to be able to replace that in time if you rely on nuclear. That's the gist of what he said. Gas, of course, everyone's talking about gas. At the moment, it only accounts for about 5% of power generation in the national electricity market, but it is a very reliable source of supply of electricity. And Mr. Westerman says it will actually be the backstop over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, and something that Australia has in abundance too, Sean.
Absolutely, yeah.
CSL has won contracts to supply avian flu vaccinations to Europe and the US as companies ramp up preparations for the dangerous virus.
CSL supplying the US government with 4.8 million vials, and the European Union has ordered 650 shots with an option for a further 40 million. Now, last month, Finland ordered 20,000 vials, enough to vaccinate 10,000 fur and poultry workers. CSL said governments around the world are preparing for a potential outbreak of the H5N1 avian flu virus. CSL's vaccines are pre-pandemic. That means they can be rolled out to high-risk groups like poultry and dairy workers, lab staff and healthcare workers ahead of time to hopefully prevent an outbreak.
Transurban has 6 months to renegotiate tolling contracts on almost a dozen motorways it operates in Sydney, or have them restructured after an independent review recommended the New South Wales government take back control and reduce bills for drivers.
The review, led by former Competition Commission Chair Alan Fells, found a new regime should replace separate tolls on the motorways, with the changes reducing the amount paid by drivers predominantly in Sydney's west, according to a report in the AFR. This, if it happened, would be a major overhaul of tolling in that city. The shortfall in the tolling would be partly funded by the government, while most toll relief schemes should also be scrapped. The review found drivers in Sydney's north and east, largely coalition electorates, would pay much more, though, through two-way tolling on the Harbour Bridge, Harbour Tunnel and Eastern Distributor. Transurban has told the government it's willing to discuss new arrangements, but it wants to be compensated for that. The company has suggested its contracts could be changed by the end of next year.
Yeah, tolling is a thorn in the proverbial side of Sydney motorists and has been for over a decade now.
Absolutely.
In international news, China's manufacturing sector grew faster than the overall economy for a third quarter in a row, demonstrating that industry and exports, rather than property, Sean, are driving growth in the world's second largest economy.
Manufacturing expanded 6.2% last quarter, faster than the 4.7% overall growth rate in the economy. Manufacturing contributed about 27% of total activity, according to Bloomberg. The strength contrasts with the shrinking real estate sector, which contracted for a fifth quarter in a row. Beijing has in recent years emphasised investing in high-tech manufacturing to drive growth, especially after it tried to reduce financial risk in the economy by puncturing the housing bubble. That's helped boost production and exports of goods like electric cars, batteries and semiconductors, but it hasn't really led to a rebound in domestic consumption yet. That's what Beijing needs to work on now.
Oil exploration is not dead, with ExxonMobil planning to drill up to 30 wells as part of its 7th oil project in Guyana.
Yeah, that really surprised me that so much drilling is going on. The project, which is pending government approval, would start production in 2029, lifting Guyana's capacity to more than 1.4 million barrels of oil per day, according to Reuters. The Hammerhead project will pump as much as 180,000 barrels a day as soon as 2029. Guyana is a growing oil resource. Output's expected to jump 25% over the next 5 years. It just highlights that oil drilling is alive and well. In fact, it's increasing. In the US alone, the number of wells drilled has been trending higher ever since 2016.
That's intriguing. Now, the price of cotton has tumbled as growing competition between the world's biggest producers drives up supply, while cost-conscious shoppers seek out clothes made out of cheaper fabrics.
So ICE cotton futures, ICE being the Intercontinental Exchange, where you trade cotton, Futures fell below 69 US cents a pound this month. Now, that's the lowest level since October 2020, less than half the 10-year peak hit in May 2022. There's a couple of reasons for this. Prices have dropped because of a sharp rise in production in Brazil, which recently overtook the US as the world's largest cotton exporter. The South American country exported 12.4 million bales in the 2023-24 harvest season. 11.8 came from the US. Why are we so interested? Because Australia is the third biggest exporter of cotton. We shipped about 5.8 million bales in that season. While Brazil's ramped up production, demand has dropped, particularly since the pandemic. The economic slowdown and rising interest rates has squeezed consumers. We know that. The demand for polyester has jumped and other man-made fabrics, but cotton, it's slumped. So what we're seeing is both on the demand and supply side, things being crunched and the price of cotton tumbling.
And like George from Seinfeld, I'll always maintain, Sean, that cotton is king.
What I was thinking more was the comment from Jerry to Kramer about the, millimetres of polyester between...
the thin layer of gabardine.
Was that what it was? The thin layer of gabardine. Yes. I might leave that there, actually.
I'm sure there's much gabardine production in Brazil. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview with Matthew Kidman, Principal at Centennial Asset Management.
We speak to Matthew about why the ASX topped 8,000 points this week, setting a new record high, and what is going to happen next. Great chat with Matthew, as always.
That's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Actually, Julian, before I go, I just have to give a quick plug to our newsletter. It's out about 11:30 this morning, well, about 11:45, probably straight after the employment numbers are released. We'll put something out, basically our news and views on what's going on in the economy, give some talk to what's happening in the markets, employment, Donald Trump, stuff like that. You can still sign up for it. fearandgreed.com.au is the place to do it. If you've done that by about 11 o'clock this morning, you'll get this morning's newsletter.
Yep, it's great content. It is Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online at LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. Have a great day.